Welcome. I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Now grab a notepad, grab that pen because you're going to want to take notes. Today we're going to cover a really important topic today, and I want you to take notes and jot down some sort of action item each and every day that we have a discussion, because that's what it's all about. We have to implement something in your business to drive your business forward. Today we're going to talk about follow-up, and do not tune out if you know that you're not good at follow-up. Why? Why follow-up? What is follow-up? Well, every business, of course, relies on sales. That's where it all starts. Sales is the first domino that needs to be knocked over. And you might think of yourself as not a sales expert per se, and you don't have to worry about that and first of all, you do have to acknowledge that you have to sort of be a sales expert if you're in management, if you are an entrepreneur, if you own a business. You have to have a good, thorough understanding of sales. But why I say you don't have to worry if you think that you're not a sales expert is because to realize that you are much more in tune with the concepts behind sales than you may realize. All you have to do is frame everything through the lens of a customer, and it may not even be your customer. You may not have ever purchased the item it is that you sell. You may you might market something that some of you who are in sales are marketing items that you can't even afford. And so think about, instead, as a consumer, when you purchase stuff, what is it that you purchase and what are your behaviors? When you frame things through that lens, you can understand sales really, really well. You just want to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. We want to be, as managers, empathic to customers and try to get inside their heads so that we can predict behaviors, and then we can create strategies within our business to get the desired outcomes that we have. All right, so follow up. Well, once again, think of yourselves the last time you considered buying something. We can understand that people don't always pull the trigger and move forward and purchase something the very first time that they consider it. Maybe you've done a little bit of research. Maybe you've done the proverbial window shopping or the proverbial tire kicking. You went and done a little bit in the brick and mortar stores of looking around, or you went online. Far more common now as you're doing research online, but you're not necessarily moving forward at that time. And that's what consumers do. That's what your customers are doing as well. Now, of course, some of you are selling very small ticket, very reasonably priced. Well, hopefully all of you are selling very reasonably priced things that add great value in the market. But what I mean to say is some of you are selling items that are very, very, very inexpensive, and you're doing a high volume of transactions on very little things, while others who are watching this are doing low volume with high ticket priced items, and you're doing fewer transactions. And of course, those of you who are dealing with higher priced items can appreciate that your customers, your target market, your prospective customers, your leads, are doing more research by and large. Not each and every time. It's not a hard and fast rule. There are some people who go out and purchase very high-priced items on a whim, and these people we call rich. And so I would encourage you to always be in a frame of mind that your customer is ready to pull the trigger, and you want to make sure that no matter how it is that you sell, that you have the attitude that those that are engaging with you are ready to move forward. But we understand, for the purposes of today's discussion, we understand that there is a high percentage of customers that don't engage and don't move forward with the transaction the very first time. So think about what percentage of customers are moving forward and converting from lead to customer the very first time they explore that. Various industries have various what we'd say conversion ratios or closing ratios, and you should know what that is for yours. But no matter who you are, most of you have a business where the majority of customers, or rather prospective customers, leads, do not convert to a sale the very first time. More than 50% are going to need a little bit more time before they convert. So once we agree with that, And again, in order for you to understand that, you don't have to listen to me, you have to think about yourself when you're going out and shopping. What percentage of times do you pull the trigger the very first time that you thought about it? You know, only on probably those low ticket items is a very high percentage of the times that, you know, some sort of staple item that you need for around the house, or staple food item, that kind of thing. Of course, we typically pull the trigger right away on those. We convert immediately. But when it's a new product, something you don't have each and every day, these are the types of things, again, as you frame it through the lens of a customer, you're the consumer, you can appreciate, oh no, I do a little bit of research on that. I want to make sure that I'm getting the best value. I don't want to get the one that, you know, is rated low or that breaks easily or whatever it is. You want to make sure, like everybody does with every product and service, that you have good value when you're spending your money. So when, again, you're not a sales expert necessarily, but you are a consuming expert, and you can appreciate, yeah, now that you think of it through that lens, yeah, most times I do a little bit of research. I come back the next day, maybe I do a lot of research over a week or a month, or sometimes even longer, depending on, you know, if you're considering a home or a vehicle. These things typically people do a little bit more research on for those higher ticket items. So now that we've agreed on that, we know that people don't, very frequently people do not interact with you and transact with you. I'm trying to say they do not buy their first time. Therefore, you have the majority of your customers, you're the majority, I keep saying customers, but let's have a definition here. When they haven't purchased yet, they're not your customer. They are a lead, they are a prospective customer. You're hoping to convert them to a customer. So the majority of your leads are not customers. That means you have invested in gaining attention, getting people into your sales funnel, and they're starting to research your product, but the majority of them are not buying it. Therefore, follow-up is necessary. It took this long to get to the point where we realized follow-up is very necessary. Now, I've covered follow-up and sales process training before, and we're just going to do some little bit of review, the different types of training, but today I want to get into some new material to help you guide on how you should be following up based on framing it through the lens of return on investment once again. All right, so speaking of going through a little bit of review, I always say there are three primary reasons for follow-up, or three types of follow-up. The first follow-up type is pre-sale. And again, you are following up with leads, with prospective customers, in an effort to try to convert them from lead to customer. So prior to the sale, that is the first type of follow-up. The second type of follow-up is post-sale, but pre-delivery. And again, depending on what product or service you offer, there can be a variety of lengths of time between the time that someone makes the decision to interact and engage with you in a commerce transaction and the time that it takes for them to receive delivery. Sometimes it's instantaneous. Sometimes you collect their money at one moment and then you get the product or the service delivered to them later on. And some of you are sort of delivering product on an ongoing basis, some sorts of subscriptions or services that people continue to pay for. You think of your Netflix as an example, or maybe your internet service provider. So you're on an ongoing basis. And we can kind of, that's a little bit of splitting hairs there, because you could say from one month to another, that is individual transactions. And many of you are also dealing with things that take a long time from the initial moment that somebody makes a decision before they take delivery. If you're in new home sales, as examples, someone maybe decides to build a home, they put down a deposit, and it may take almost a year before they actually are in there. And in some markets, it may even take longer than a year. And so there's the second form of sales is post-sale, but pre-delivery. And the third form, you can guess it, is post-delivery. Now, there are different objectives you have with those different types of follow-up. The first type of follow-up, that pre-sale follow-up with leads, the primary objective, as we already said, is to convert somebody from a lead to a customer. And in order to do that, because we know that people buy from those that they know, like, and trust, we want to get people to know, like, and trust us, our brand, our company, our product. And how we do that is through building a relationship, building rapport. And so you build relationship in that form of follow-up. In the second form of follow-up, that being the post-sale, pre-delivery, the objective is to reinforce the decision that the person made to engage with you. You want to let them know, you want to give them continual updates on when they can expect their product, and that basically keep them happy. If you break down on this type of follow-up, you're likely to get buyer's remorse, people wanting refunds, the number of customers that make it through to delivery and happy customer will go down. And then on the third type of sales, which is, the third type of follow-up, which is post-delivery, that being after sale, your objective is to retain your customers. And when we retain customers, how we do that is by delighting them. So you're focused on customer satisfaction, delighting customers, I preferred to word it, which means we can retain them in hopes of repeat business from them and a greater number of, a greater order next time perhaps, and we can get referral business from them. And also, this form of sales is not often thought, I keep saying sales, this form of follow-up, there's another benefit to it, and that is when you look at the negative, if you aren't delighting your customers and you are doing this follow-up, you learn something about your business, and that can lead to innovation and improvement. So imagine in that third form of follow-up that you have a customer who's like, no, I'm never dealing with you again. I was not happy with the product or service or whatever. But that person does take the time to explain to you why. You can then go and research and make sure that this isn't a one-off situation, or you can figure out and investigate why the product or service was subpar and not up to your quality standards, and you can improve that. So that's another great benefit and objective you should have in that form of sales. So there's three forms of follow-up. Now, I want you to think about how it is that you do your follow-up. Of course, follow-up is a form of communication, and the type of communication you choose should fit what is most apt for your product, your service, and your objectives. So we have to explore that, and you have to think about your type of business. And again, this comes down to what sort of a level of investment it is for someone to engage or to purchase your product or service. Those of you who are selling very high ticket items, here's what I want you to think. All of you, actually. All of you think of this, that there is a cost to follow-up. There is a cost involved to follow-up. You can appreciate that. You may need to pay people to follow up for you. You may need to pay to have software that assists you with your follow-up. There is a cost to not following up, and that's one of the things I want you to jot down. Take this away right now. Do you know what the cost of your follow-up is, and do you know what the cost of failure to follow up is? In my sales career, I sold many things that were high-ticket items, and I can tell you that I learned very early on from one of my mentors how important follow-up was, and I was able to contrast my results with others who did not relentlessly follow up with prospective customers the way I did. And then what I could do is I could quantify it by taking a look at the difference in sales. And I could also compare that with times where I was very diligent in my follow-up and times when I wasn't as diligent. And I had all sorts of strategies we don't have time to get into today, but I was able to contrast those various situations and be able to quantify how important how important the follow-up was in getting the sales, in resulting in sales. And by doing that, then I could look at, well, what is the expense involved in the follow-up, and I could look at it through a return on investment. And I can just tell you, here's the punchline, spoiler alert, you don't have to do all that work in order to just conclude that the follow-up does work. But you may wish to do this work so that you can focus on how should you follow up. So again, if you are engaging in some type of business where what you're selling is a smaller price tag or whatever, you can't afford to have a sales representative go out and visit your prospective customers who didn't convert. Like, imagine the last time you bought a toothbrush, you didn't expect some representative from Amazon to come to your door and ask you, were you satisfied with your toothbrush? Or if you bought it at a pharmacy or something like that, you're not getting a sales representative going to meet with you face to face to determine whether or not you are happy with your toothbrush. You get the idea. A face-to-face, the cost of following up face-to-face is very high. That's why face-to-face, in-person follow-up is usually the domain of those high-ticket item businesses. So some of you are engaged in contracting, very large projects or whatever, and you hear about people with expense accounts. They take somebody out and they wine them and dine them, so to speak, and they are following up in that regard because that person makes that decision and it's worth it. And yet, if you are selling something that's much lower priced, then in the example of the Amazon, what would you expect? You'd expect maybe something in your inbox that says, could you rate this toothbrush? And so ask yourself how, if at all, for goodness sake, if you're not following up, you got to start that today. But how are you following up? And we've just said it's a form of communication. So are you communicating digitally with follow-up through email or text message, something like that? Or are you following up with telephone service? And you've probably received phone calls before with people you've engaged in business with, and they followed up with you. It could have been the actual sales representative that you dealt with called you and said, I just want to see how you're enjoying your product. Things going well. I'm a phone call away if you need any assistance, that kind of thing. Are you following up with face-to-face? Some of you are probably doing all three forms, or rather, you're doing all the different types of follow-up, but what I mean to say is you are following up via digital mechanisms, you're following up via face-to-face, you're following up on the telephone, maybe you're even doing some snail mail follow-up. There's all sorts of ways you can do this, but digital follow-up, of course, is typically the least expensive form of follow-up, and I suspect that most of you are relying more and more heavily on digital follow-up, and most of your customers are being trained. Their expectations are being framed by big companies such as I listed Amazon, and to expect some sort of a digital follow-up. If you consider a purchase online, you could purchase something very expensive, maybe from another retailer, some sort of electronics, maybe you shop online with Costco or something like that, and you can buy something of several $1,000s and you can get a follow-up email from them. Again, their business model doesn't afford them the ability to send out a sales representative to find out, and that's how they're able to offer lower prices. So we can therefore conclude that digital follow-up mechanisms are very cost-effective and becoming more and more, therefore, part of the common landscape and what people are expecting. So I would encourage you to consider, how are you doing this? And then when you tie this back to our earlier discussions of the three types of follow-up, you can start to imagine what types of follow-up you would do. So if we conclude, well, I think I want to do more digital follow-up, so what kind of digital follow-up are you doing for people that are prospective leads, prospective customers? They're leads, they're not customers yet. And that's what we would call some sort of nurturing. That's referred to as nurturing the lead nurturing. And if you consider the term nurturing, you don't want to be pestered, right? So it's not called lead pestering, it's lead nurturing. So what you have to do in that kind of thing, since it's very easy for you to continually sort of drip on them over time with messages, you can remind them, of course, that you have the product that they were once interested in or they started to do some research for. But in addition to doing that, you want to do that relationship building. Remember what we said, people buy from those that they know, like, and trust. So what are you doing in your nurturing to strengthen that relationship? And that means you're not just constantly telling them that your product is still available for sale or whatever. You can give them updates if there's improvements to your product or changes in the delivery time, you can give them updates. Certainly if there are discounts to be had, maybe your inventory has a surplus at a particular time, so you have a sales or a promotional offer, you can offer that, and that can be very enticing to someone who is not quite ready to pull the trigger yet. But in addition to those types of things, which are all sales related, how about just some kind of value? Giving them some value, some content that you produce, your newsletter, which is a way of reminding them that your business is around to service them without outwardly saying, please give me your money for this particular thing that the abandoned cart scenario. So you may be measuring abandoned carts and you're sending out emails to people, 10% off if you go to checkout right now. That stuff is all well and good, but you can also just be sending other electronic communication that adds value to your customer, some content that you produce, and that's a way of building sort of a relationship between you and your customer or your prospective customer. So give some thought to that. And then when we talk about your post-sale pre-delivery, that's a completely different type of follow-up, right? And you've all received this, where you're getting updates on here's where your product is in the journey from the time you gave us the order until it's going to be delivered. Here's what's going on. Here's the schedule. We have someone coming out to your home at this time, or they're coming out to perform the service. Here's the booking link. All these types of things. So it's more about keeping you informed and re-informing you as a customer that the business has your money and we're making progress toward giving you what you signed up for. And how are you going to do that? Again, digitally, you're going to need some tools that allow you to do that, some scheduling tools, and you want to automate that as much as possible and not rely so heavily on human nature. Now, there are some big ticket items where the organizations are very reliant on people for making those calls. And that's fine. That can actually be a little warmer, and maybe customers want to hear from a live person, and sometimes they would prefer to have just a digital update. It might be more convenient, but if it's going to be a live person, at least you behind the scenes have to have some automation set up to make sure nothing falls through the cracks, and that that each and every customer is getting that phone call and so there's ways of doing that within your customer relationship management tool. And then also when you talk about your post-sale follow-up, there's a whole different mechanism for doing that. And once again, it becomes now customer nurturing. They're no longer leads, they are customers. But now what we're doing is we continue to let them know when we have new product offerings or when there's sales. But again, we want to offer them value. Here's some tips that might give you some better use out of the product that you have. Here's some add-ons or accessories that might go well with your product. What kind of newsletters, vlogs, videos, and things that you can give to your customer, ebooks, things that your customer might appreciate, that reminds them that you're there for them and they made a good decision to go with you. And you can also get some of that feedback by having them rate the product and everything. So wrapping your mind around all these things, you're listening, and I wonder, what of these things are you doing and what are you not doing? I have recently inquired about making some purchases with a few things, and with some businesses I'm getting follow-up and they want to know whether I'm going to move forward. Some are very aggressive and giving me discounts and all sorts of things to try to get me to pull the trigger. Others are radio silent. I'm getting no follow-up whatsoever. And I already said in this video, I already said earlier that 100% you can confirm that those that follow up are getting more business. They are converting more business. So that doesn't mean I will not convert as a customer for someone who's not following up, but the likelihood of me converting goes down, because the likelihood of me forgetting that is just, we're just humans. So we forget. It's like, oh yeah, I was researching that or whatever, but life is busy, I moved on or whatever. And these other guys who are reminding me, hey, we've got this special on right now, you were checking this out, we noticed you had an abandoned cart, or you called in and you inquired about this, we have a special going on right now, or we just want to ask you, have you made a decision, the time frame that we should be working on this and coming out to complete the work is approaching whatever it is. And are you doing this follow-up? Do you want to turn the video off because you're thinking, I'm not doing this and I feel guilty, or you don't see the value? There is value there. I think it comes down to having the right tools. And you need to have a good CRM, a good customer relationship management tool to track all of this. So at a moment's notice, you could print a report. You can see where people are in the sales funnel. Of course, if you don't even have any follow-up information from your customer, if you don't know their name or email address or contact information, if you have no email address, you have no phone number, you have no mailing address, how are you going to actually do any form of follow-up? You can't. So it starts with that. But with a good CRM tool, you can see what you have, and you can put customers into different buckets, and you can define them as prospective leads, or customers who've taken or who've engaged in the sale but haven't taken delivery yet, and customers who have taken delivery. And then you can set up different campaigns and automations to follow up with each of them differently. And then you can make if-then statements in your automations that if this customer does this particular thing with the email I sent him out, then we will do whatever. So if you don't have the ability to do any of this automation or whatever, you're really missing out on an advantage that your competition has, and you're at a disadvantage, and your competition is likely to beat you. There's somebody I dealt with for years, and I just received an email follow-up with a special that they have going on, but I thought it was ironic that this person had thousands of dollars that I spent with I'm saying person, but this business had thousands of dollars that I had spent with them. I didn't hear anything from them. I switched suppliers and they never even called me, contacted me, emailed me, or did anything to find out why. And then out of the blue, I got an email. But it was good because it reminded me, and actually I looked at the email, I looked at what specials they had and that kind of thing. So if you are, what reminded me of that is the fact that it was automated. It was clearly automated, and they just blasted it out to everyone. They didn't have me in a bucket. They didn't have me defined, where maybe they should have had a different strategy with me because I was a good customer at one point and the revenues that they are realizing from me have gone way down. That can be something that we can automate. And you can set this up and have completely different strategies for follow-up based on having good tools. So again, when you talk about the ratio between the expense, the cost of follow-up, and the cost of not following up, you have to weigh this stuff in there. So how much is it going to cost you to have these tools that I'm describing? They are really inexpensive. There's never been a time in history where you can have this technology at work for you for less money. So I would encourage you to reach out to BMI, go to our website, bickertmanagement.com. We can get you on all the software. We can set up all the automations for you, and we can integrate all of your tools so they talk to one another, so that your reports and your strategies all work seamlessly. And if this stuff all seems a little foreign to you, then just leave it to a company like ours. But some of you are very good at this kind of stuff. You've already got software, and you just needed a reminder that this is imperative and this is something you should be doing. And maybe you're relying too heavily on people telling you, yeah, it's being done. You've got to each and every day sort of ask yourself if your expectations are being are met rather, and then you have to go back and inspect those expectations, look at your measurements. You can hear I'm talking faster because I'm wrapping up the video. I've gone long, and I'm realizing as I go on here that there's just so much we can cover that I'll cover this in greater detail in other videos, but I wanted you to get back to thinking about follow-up, thinking about how you're following up. Is it time for you to finally get some software and get somebody who understands the automations and can set this kind of stuff up for you, campaigns and putting various types of definitions for your different types of customers and where they are on their sales journey, and strategizing differently for each of them. I would encourage you to reach out to us if you've decided that this is a good time to do that. That's where I want to leave it today. I'm curious to hear from you if you got anything out of this. Are you a master at follow-up? Is follow-up, we used to call it the 40-pound phone, or is it the type of thing where you're like, because of the rejection I get, I'd rather not do the follow-up? That's flawed thinking, of course. Leave some comments that we can all learn from, because we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.